Imagine for a moment that there exists within you an invisible current, a force so potent, so magnetic, that it shapes the world around you without a single word being spoken. This current is not visible to the eye, nor can it be captured by instruments of science, yet it is felt, unmistakably, by those who come near you. I speak of the psychic energy that ancient men once revered, the vital essence that modern man has squandered in his pursuit of fleeting pleasure. You see, what we call semen retention is not merely a physical discipline. It is an archetypal journey, a confrontation with one's own shadow. For within the act of retaining this sacred life force, a man withdraws his energy from the outer chaos and turns it inward, toward transformation. Every drop of this energy contains the possibility of creation, not only of life but of genius, of will, of divine consciousness itself. To retain it is to stand guard at the gates of your own power. Most men today live in dispersion, their energy scattered by indulgence, their minds enslaved to desire. They mistake release for freedom, pleasure for fulfillment. But when a man masters himself, when he chooses restraint over surrender, something extraordinary occurs. That which was once expended outward begins to build an inner fire. It rises like a serpent through the spine, awakening dormant centers of perception, clarity, and confidence. His very presence begins to vibrate differently. Women, though often unconscious of it, are attuned to this vibration. They sense it as certainty, as vitality, as mystery. It is not the empty bravado of the untempered male, but the silent magnetism of one who has learned to govern his inner world. He does not chase, he attracts. He does not seek validation, he emanates value. The feminine instinct recognizes in him the essence of life itself, controlled, potent, and purposeful. This magnetism cannot be faked, for it is born from the alignment of body, mind, and spirit. It is the alchemy of self-restraint turned into radiance. As you cultivate this discipline, you begin to withdraw from the collective hypnosis of gratification and step into your own myth, the path of the self-realized man. And from that moment, attraction ceases to be something you pursue. It becomes something you are. For the man who masters his own essence, the world begins to bend subtly toward him. People listen differently. Opportunities open. Energy obeys him. He has reclaimed what was his all along, the deep magnetic presence of a man who has met his instincts, tamed them, and transformed them into power. That is the secret most never discover, that the seed you preserve is not lost energy, but the very soul of your potential, waiting to be awakened. There exists a force within man so profound that it borders on the mystical, a living reservoir of vitality that carries within it the very pattern of creation. In the ancient world, this force was revered, protected, and understood as sacred. Today it has been forgotten, dismissed as superstition, or worse, reduced to mere biology. Yet what we call semen retention is not about biology alone. It is the conscious recognition that our sexual energy is the root of our psychic power, the raw material from which our strength, confidence, and clarity are born. You see, within this vital essence lies the archetype of the creator. To waste it carelessly is to scatter one's own potential into the void. To preserve it consciously is to begin the process of psychological transmutation. When a man restrains himself, he is not denying his nature. He is mastering it. And mastery in the Jungian sense is never repression. It is integration. The libido, or life force, must not be suppressed but redirected, sublimated toward higher aims. This is the same energy that fuels a great idea, a work of art, an empire. The man who learns to channel it ceases to be enslaved by impulse and becomes an architect of his destiny. Most men today live in a perpetual state of inner division. Their will is weak because their instincts rule them. They expend their most potent energy for fleeting satisfaction, leaving themselves hollow and restless. They wonder why their presence lacks impact, why women seem indifferent, why life feels devoid of meaning. The truth is that attraction, true organic attraction, arises not from surface traits but from an unseen energy field, a magnetic coherence between mind and body. When a man guards his vital energy, he begins to radiate a frequency that others can feel. It is the quiet power of someone who no longer seeks validation, for he has found fulfillment in his own containment. This magnetism is not a trick or a technique. It cannot be faked or forced. It emerges naturally when your inner world becomes ordered, when your instincts are harmonized with your intellect. Jung once said that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Semen retention is one way of making the unconscious conscious by confronting the deepest seat of your instinctual nature and transforming it into self-awareness. Through this discipline, a man comes face to face with his shadow, his urges, his compulsions, his hunger for pleasure, and learns to hold them in the light of consciousness. This act alone begins the process of individuation, the journey towards psychological wholeness. As this energy accumulates, something subtle yet profound begins to occur. The eyes sharpen, the posture straightens, speech becomes deliberate, grounded, commanding. A man who once moved restlessly through life begins to emanate a stillness, a presence. Women, and indeed people in general, sense this difference immediately. It is not aggression, not arrogance, it is centeredness. The feminine is instinctively drawn to the masculine that contains itself, for it mirrors the eternal balance of nature, the dynamic contained within the stable, the chaos harmonized by structure. To retain one's essence, then, is not merely an act of self-control, it is an act of reverence. You are telling your psyche that your energy has value, that your life force is not to be squandered on trivial pursuits, and this message transforms you. It alters the way you think, the way you move, the way you engage with the world. In the modern age, where everything urges immediate gratification, such restraint is revolutionary. It signals to the unconscious and to the world that you are no longer ruled by instinct but guided by purpose. When a man stands in this state, his aura speaks louder than his words. He becomes magnetic, not because he tries to be, but because he has become whole. The mystery of attraction, often reduced to techniques and appearances, is in truth a matter of energetic integrity. You cannot deceive the psyche. It knows whether your power is scattered or contained. The woman's intuition recognizes this instantly, not intellectually, but viscerally. She feels in you the presence of something rare, a man who possesses himself, and that is the ultimate secret. To retain your essence is to reclaim your center. It is to turn the raw chaos of desire into a living flame of purpose. When you learn to hold this fire, not as a burden but as a source of creation, you begin to influence reality itself. People respond to you differently. Circumstances align. Life takes on depth and meaning. In the end, this practice is not about attraction alone, it is about awakening. For when you guard your life force, you are in truth guarding your soul. And from that moment on, the world no longer happens to you. It begins to respond to the man you have chosen to become. Every human being carries within them a field of unseen energy, an aura shaped by thought, emotion, and instinct. But in men, there exists a particular current, a magnetic force born from their sexual vitality, their drive, their will to create. This force, when left unchecked, often disperses through indulgence, distraction, and compulsive release. Yet, when harnessed consciously, it becomes a field of attraction so profound that others can feel it without ever understanding why. This is what I call magnetic masculinity, the natural radiance that emerges when a man's sexual energy is no longer leaking outward, but flowing upward into the higher centers of being. Semen retention, in its deepest sense, is not about abstinence. It is about transmutation, the transformation of raw sexual energy into creative power, intellectual clarity, and emotional gravity. A man who practices this art begins to vibrate differently. His energy becomes concentrated, coherent, and charged with purpose. The eyes brighten with intensity, the voice deepens with conviction, the movements slow with confidence. These changes are not superficial. They arise from the harmonization of the man's internal energies. He ceases to chase, to seek approval, to depend on the validation of others. Instead, he becomes a self-contained source of vitality, and that is what women instinctively feel. It is crucial to understand that the feminine is drawn not merely to appearance or words, but to energy. The psyche of the woman is magnetically attuned to vitality and presence, to life force in its most ordered form. When a man dissipates this energy through excess and indulgence, his aura becomes fragmented. He radiates need instead of strength. But when he retains and refines it, he exudes an invisible confidence. a calm authority that demands no attention, yet commands it naturally. It is not a matter of dominance, but of polarity, the timeless dance of masculine and feminine, energy in its purest expression. Carl Jung often spoke of the animus and anima, the inner masculine, and feminine archetypes residing within each soul. When a man loses himself in lust or dependence on external pleasure, he becomes unbalanced. His inner feminine becomes chaotic. His masculine principle weakens. But when he begins to hold and direct his sexual essence, the inner marriage between these archetypes begins to occur. His anima becomes purified, no longer projecting fantasies onto women, but serving as a bridge to deeper creativity and intuition. His animus, the inner masculine, grows stronger, more focused, more aligned with purpose. Out of this integration arises an energy that the outer world responds to instinctively, especially the feminine psyche. This is why a man practicing retention often finds that women begin to notice him differently. They sense in him something they cannot quite define, a combination of calm and intensity, of gentleness and power. It is not charm, it is presence. And presence is magnetic. The paradox is that true attraction never requires pursuit. It arises when one becomes whole within oneself. The man who has mastered his desire no longer radiates lack, but abundance. His energy says, I do not need, I choose. And this energy is irresistibly compelling because it mirrors the feminine's deepest longing, to be met by a consciousness that can contain her chaos without being consumed by it. From a psychological standpoint, semen retention transforms a man's relationship to his instincts. It forces him to face the parts of himself he would rather escape, lust, loneliness, fear of rejection, and to hold them in awareness without collapse. This act of self-possession strengthens the psyche. Each moment of discipline becomes a declaration of sovereignty. The man ceases to be a slave to pleasure and becomes a master of energy. Over time, his nervous system adjusts to this new level of containment. The energy that once sought release now fuels his ambitions, his vision, his creativity. He becomes luminous with potential, and the world recognizes it even if it cannot name it. To the modern mind, this might sound mystical, even implausible, but the truth is evident in experience. Spend time near a man who has cultivated this discipline, and you will feel his charge. He speaks with gravity. His silence carries weight. His mere presence alters the emotional tone of a room. This is not manipulation. It is magnetism. It is the natural consequence of aligning instinct with intention, energy with awareness. The Jungian self, that totality of consciousness striving toward wholeness, expresses itself most powerfully when the lower drives are sublimated, not suppressed. In that alchemical process, sexuality becomes spirituality, and attraction becomes influence. And so, magnetic masculinity is not achieved by pretending to be confident, nor by rehearsing lines or gestures. It is the spontaneous radiation of a man who has learned to master his essence, who stands in quiet power because he has met himself fully and withheld nothing from that encounter. He is not at war with his desires. He has befriended them, harnessed them, transformed them into strength. If you wish to become truly magnetic, do not chase women, chase your own potential. Withdraw your energy from the external and let it circulate within. Let your vitality refine you, harden you, illuminate you. In time, you will discover that attraction is not a pursuit at all. It is the echo of self-mastery. Remember this, the greatest secret of attraction is not what you do, but what you have become. When your energy is whole, the world cannot help but be drawn to you. Desire is not an enemy. It is a messenger. It carries within it the fire of transformation, the same energy that can destroy a man if left uncontrolled, or elevate him if he learns to channel it. Every instinct, every sexual impulse, is a form of life force seeking direction. To repress it is to deny your nature. To indulge it without awareness is to become enslaved by it. The art lies in alchemy, in transforming that raw, chaotic impulse into a refined, creative power. This is what the ancient mystics called transmutation, and what Jung recognized as the process of sublimation, the redirection of instinctual energy toward higher forms of expression. When you practice semen retention, you are engaging in a form of inner alchemy. You are choosing to hold within you the very force of creation, to allow it to mature, to ascend through the levels of consciousness rather than dissipate in moments of pleasure. The tension you feel, that restlessness, that heat, that craving, is the crucible of transformation. It is the psychic fire where the lower and higher selves meet. If you can endure that tension without collapse, something begins to happen within you. Your energy, once chaotic, becomes luminous. It refines itself, like base metal turning into gold. This process changes the way you perceive the world. Your desires no longer dominate you. They inform you. They point toward purpose. You begin to see that sexual energy is not limited to the act of reproduction, but is the essence of creation itself, the same current that moves through artists, thinkers, and visionaries. When you no longer expend this force carelessly, it begins to serve your evolution. Your thoughts become sharper, your emotions more stable, your intuition more vivid. You begin to feel connected to something larger than your impulses, to a deep intelligence that flows through all living things. In Jungian terms, this is the moment the libido, the life force, withdraws from mere instinctual expression and begins to serve the individuation process, the realization of the self. It is a turning inward, where the man ceases to live only through appetite and begins to live through purpose. But this transition demands courage, for the energy that once gave you pleasure now confronts you with your shadow. All your suppressed emotions, fears, and fantasies rise to the surface. Retention exposes them. It forces you to meet the parts of yourself you have avoided. The lust, the guilt, the shame, the need for validation. Only by facing these can you integrate them. This is why semen retention, properly understood, is not a moral act but a psychological initiation. It is not about denial. It is about depth. The alchemy of retention also reconfigures your relationship to women. You cease to see them merely as outlets for desire and begin to recognize them as mirrors of your own inner feminine, your anima. The attraction you feel becomes a dialogue between the masculine and feminine energies within you. The woman is no longer a symbol of conquest, but a reflection of your own integration. As your inner feminine becomes more balanced, your relationships with women transform. You meet them not from hunger, but from wholeness, and from that state, connection becomes sacred, not compulsive. What you begin to realize is that the magnetism people sense in you, the attraction, the confidence, the groundedness, is not a performance. It is the natural fragrance of a man who has turned his desire into awareness. The energy that once moved outward as lust now moves upward as insight. You begin to walk differently, speak differently, think differently. There is a quiet gravity in your being. The feminine senses it instantly, because it resonates with the deeper rhythms of life itself, stability, purpose, creation. But this transformation does not happen passively. It requires deliberate awareness. Each time you choose to hold your energy rather than release it, you are forging yourself anew. You are teaching your psyche that pleasure can be transcended into power, and that tension can be turned into strength. In this way, semen retention becomes a spiritual practice disguised as discipline. It is not about becoming celibate or detached from the body. It is about inhabiting the body fully, directing its forces consciously. Over time, you come to understand that what you are cultivating is not simply attraction, but radiance, a deep, stable luminosity that others can feel. This is the true alchemy of masculine energy, the ability to transform instinct into intention, passion into purpose, desire into drive. In that process, you become the artist of your own soul, shaping the raw clay of your biology into a masterpiece of presence. So when people speak of attraction, they often think of techniques, appearances, or manipulation. But those are the games of the fragmented man. The whole man needs none of them. His magnetism arises from the fact that his energy is complete, unscattered, self-contained, and luminous. He has turned his seed into light, and this is the essence of the alchemy of retention. To hold your fire not in fear but in reverence, to let it illuminate your path, rather than consume you. When you master this inner art, you realize that the greatest pleasure is not in release, but in radiance, the deep satisfaction of becoming a vessel for creative power. Remember this: the seed you withhold is not lost energy. It is potential waiting for purpose. Hold it, refine it, and let it shape you into the man your destiny demands you to become. There is a subtle fire that lives in every man, a quiet pulse beneath the noise of thought and desire. It is the current of life itself, the same force that animates the body, drives ambition and shapes destiny. Most men never feel this fire clearly, because it is scattered, diffused by constant indulgence, distraction, and sensory pursuit. But when a man begins to turn his awareness inward, to contain this energy rather than spend it recklessly, he begins to awaken what might be called the inner fire, the transformative force that makes him magnetic, creative and spiritually alive. Semen retention is not merely the withholding of release. It is the cultivation of this inner fire. It is the conscious redirection of sexual energy away from its habitual outlets and into the deeper centers of being. At first, the practice can feel uncomfortable. The body resists containment because it has been conditioned toward escape. Escape from tension, from desire, from stillness. But it is precisely in the act of holding that energy, of enduring the heat of restraint, that the alchemical process begins. This fire, once chaotic and uncontrolled, starts to illuminate the unconscious, revealing the vast reserves of vitality and clarity that lie dormant within. In Jungian terms, this fire is the awakening of the libido in its purest form, not just sexual, but creative, spiritual, and psychological. Jung saw libido as the fundamental energy of life, not confined to the act of sex, but expressed in art, thought, and the pursuit of meaning. When this energy is retained, it does not vanish. It transforms. It rises through the psychic structure, feeding imagination, sharpening focus, and strengthening will. The man begins to feel more alive because he is no longer leaking his essence into the void. He is allowing it to circulate, to nourish his entire being. This awakening alters everything about his presence. His words carry weight because they are backed by energy. His eyes reflect vitality because they are lit from within. His movements slow down because he is no longer in a hurry to escape himself. And what is most fascinating is that this transformation cannot be faked. It must be lived. People, especially women, sense it immediately. The feminine instinct is exquisitely attuned to the masculine, who has learned to master his own energy. She recognizes not his perfection, but his wholeness. A man who has met his shadow and is no longer afraid of it. The inner fire of semen retention burns away illusion. It reveals how much of modern masculinity has been built on pretense, on external validation, on the performance of confidence rather than its cultivation. True strength, however, comes not from what is displayed but from what is contained. When you can hold your desire without being possessed by it, you begin to emit a field of calm intensity that draws others in. This is not the desperate energy of pursuit, but the silent gravity of presence. It is what Jung might have called the integration of the opposites, the merging of the primal and the spiritual, the instinctual and the conscious. Through this fire, you begin to refine your relationship to the feminine itself. You no longer approach women from a place of hunger or need, but from balance and reverence. The feminine is not something to be conquered, but to be complemented, an energy that responds naturally to the grounded power of the contained masculine. And here lies a paradox. The more you hold your essence, the more life offers itself to you. The world begins to open in subtle ways because you are resonating at a higher level of coherence. You are not chasing outcomes. You are aligning with them. Attraction, success, and opportunity begin to flow, not because you demand them, but because your energy field has become magnetic. This is why the practice of retention is not an ascetic withdrawal from life, but a deeper engagement with it. It sharpens perception, heightens creativity, and deepens emotional intelligence. The same fire that once drove you toward fleeting pleasure now drives you toward mastery. You begin to see that the ultimate act of freedom is not indulgence but control, not repression but conscious direction. You are no longer pushed around by instinct. You are guided by purpose. In this state, a man becomes more than just physically attractive. He becomes existentially compelling. He radiates the quiet confidence of someone who knows himself. His energy is steady, his presence grounded. People sense in him a kind of inner authority, the assurance of a man who no longer leaks his power. This is the essence of the awakened masculine, the union of discipline and vitality, control and compassion, strength and sensitivity. But such power carries responsibility. The fire you awaken can build or burn, depending on how you wield it. If directed by ego, it becomes arrogance. If guided by purpose, it becomes radiance. The key is awareness. To live each moment as a deliberate act of creation, not reaction. This is what it means to be a conscious man in an unconscious world, to turn instinct into wisdom and passion into presence. The inner fire is not something to be feared or suppressed. It is the divine spark that connects you to life itself. When you learn to hold it, to nurture it and to express it through creation rather than consumption, you begin to embody a power that few ever touch. So let the fire rise, not to consume you but to illuminate you. For when a man learns to burn without burning out, he becomes a light to others. And that light, once awakened, never goes out. There is a silence in certain men that speaks louder than words. It is not the silence of shyness or withdrawal, but of presence. The deep, grounded stillness of one who has gathered his energy inward and fused it into coherence. You can feel it before he even speaks. His very being communicates something ancient, something magnetic. This is the silent force within, born of self-mastery and inner containment. The subtle power that semen retention awakens when practiced not as repression, but as reverence. In every man lies a reservoir of life force, a sacred essence capable of generating not only physical life but vitality, charisma, and vision. Most men, unaware of its significance, spill it away endlessly, mistaking release for relief and pleasure for freedom. But the truth is that every release depletes a measure of psychic energy, not because pleasure is evil, but because undirected energy has no opportunity to mature. The man who learns to hold his essence allows his energy to crystallize within him. It begins to circulate through the nervous system, enriching his perception, sharpening his intuition, strengthening his will. His very body becomes charged with quiet electricity. From a Jungian lens, this process represents the containment and transformation of libido, the fundamental life energy that fuels all human activity. When that energy is retained, it begins to rise from the lower centers of instinct toward the higher realms of creativity and spirit. Jung understood that psychic energy, when not consumed by immediate gratification, becomes the driving force of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole. In other words, what was once sexual becomes spiritual. What was once physical becomes metaphysical. The man no longer lives as a slave to impulse, but as a steward of his own vitality. This transformation is not visible at first. It begins quietly, in the way a man thinks, in the depth of his breathing, in the calmness of his eyes. Over time, it radiates outward. The energy he used to lose externally now builds within, creating an invisible aura of confidence and composure. This is what women feel, not as a conscious analysis, but as a visceral response. The feminine instinct senses the masculine who contains himself, because containment signals safety, power, and purpose. The man who does not scatter his energy no longer leaks emotional instability. He emanates steadiness, and that steadiness in the realm of attraction is magnetic beyond measure. Yet this force is not limited to sexual polarity. It influences every area of a man's existence. People of all kinds respond differently to him because energy is the language of the unconscious. His presence commands attention, not through domination but through harmony. His words resonate because they are not hurried. His actions inspire because they arise from inner alignment. In retaining his essence, he becomes a vessel through which life itself expresses its intelligence. He has tapped into something elemental, the original masculine principle that creates order from chaos, that brings form to the formless. But to sustain this silent power requires awareness and discipline. It is not enough to simply abstain. Abstinence without consciousness turns to frustration, even arrogance. The energy must be circulated, refined, and given form through physical discipline, creative expression, and spiritual reflection. Otherwise, it stagnates. True retention is dynamic, not static. It is the art of converting desire into direction, hunger into focus, instinct into inspiration. The man who learns this balance does not fear his desires. He harnesses them. He allows the tension of his longing to propel him toward higher goals. Such a man walks differently through the world. He does not compete for attention because he is attention, not in the sense of ego but of awareness. His eyes see more clearly, his words carry truth, and his energy influences others without intent. Jung would say he has integrated his shadow. He has faced his primitive drives and turned them into allies rather than adversaries. In doing so, he has become psychically whole. And wholeness in any human being emits a magnetic field that others feel as trust and fascination. When this inner silence matures, it becomes a kind of authority, not imposed but earned. You cannot teach it, fake it, or imitate it. It comes only from energy mastered, from knowing your depths and standing rooted in them. It is the stillness of a man who has met his chaos and ordered it. Such a man no longer needs to speak loudly or prove himself. His existence is his statement. The world bends slightly around his presence because he lives in harmony with his own center. The silent force within is not a mystery meant to remain hidden. It is available to every man who chooses awareness over impulse, purpose over pleasure, mastery over mediocrity. It asks for discipline, but it gives in return something far greater: sovereignty. The man who has mastered his energy has mastered himself, and the man who has mastered himself can shape his reality. So remember this: power does not always roar. Sometimes it breathes quietly in the chest of a man who has learned to keep his fire contained, glowing steady and bright. That is the true magnetism of the awakened masculine. Not noise, not conquest, but presence. Cultivate that silence within you, and the world will listen, even when you say nothing at all.